Okay, at this time, I would like to present Dr. Frank Stranges, and I wish you'd all give him a warm welcome. Dr. Frank.
Thank you very much. We're very happy to be here again tonight to share with you another facet of this unusual diamond called the UFO phenomena. I want everybody to stand to your feet, please, for just a moment. Turn around and shake hands with your neighbors. Tell them, God bless you. I'm glad to see you tonight. Go ahead. I generally take the liberty of asking several questions before every lecture. And the reason for this is that we make a special report to the President of the United States once a year, and we give him an idea of the reaction to the questions that we pose in various parts of the world. These are the same questions we posed last evening with some very interesting results. Question 1, how many of you have ever seen a UFO, an unidentified flying object? All right, how many of you have never seen anything unusual in the sky? And just like every other audience, you've done it again. Some of you still haven't moved. How many of you don't give a hoot whether you see it or not? Okay, how many of you would like to see something? Now, there you go. Fine. Let me follow that up by several other questions. If you saw a saucer-shaped vehicle landed in some parking lot someplace, how many of you feel that you would go toward the object? Some of you are really quick with your hands. And some of you, how many of you would go the other direction? Let's see your hands. And my third one, may I ask you why? Really, does anyone want to stand to the microphone and tell me why you would run the other direction if you saw a landed UFO? You don't know why, but you just wouldn't do it, right? All right. How many of you don't know what you would do, but you'd be willing to find out? All right. We'll see what we can arrange. Last evening, we covered quite a bit of information concerning the UFO phenomena, and we started examining the many hypotheses connected with the UFO mystery. UFO, of course, means unidentified flying objects. We're dealing with something unknown, and we must not be unfair. We must call these UFOs until they have been properly classified and identified as an identified flying object. When we closed last evening, we discussed the ET hypothesis, the military secret hypothesis, and tonight we're going to go into the secret society hypothesis. There are many UFO sightings that have taken place for literally thousands of years. And many of these have been seen and recorded by responsible individuals whose sole job it was to record strange aerial objects with strange aerial behavior. But in 1982, we still find two major classes under which UFOs have been listed. Number one, many UFOs have come from under the sea, out of the oceans, out of rivers, out of lakes. There's a place in New Jersey called Wanacue Reservoir where UFOs have been seen coming up out of the water and crashing down in the water. The United States Navy and the United States Coast Guard has many encounters, many sightings, many photographs, many pictures of undersea detection devices, graphs, where they have actually seen huge craft, some shaped like saucers, some like spheres, and some like cigar-shaped vehicles, crashing down into the water, coming up out of the water. And they say there is a secret society hypothesis under which this classification would easily fit. No nation on the earth, the United States, the Soviet Union, Canada, England, no nation claims that they have a device that could go crashing down into the water and up out of the water into the atmosphere and then on out into the stratosphere. The other hypothesis is called the hollow earth mystery, the inner earth. UFOs have been seen and photographed by the military of many nations, including the Soviet Union, according to Dr. Felix Sigel, of UFO-shaped craft, saucer-shaped craft, a craft shaped like donuts, a craft shaped almost like a cube with corners, going into the North Pole area and out of the North Pole area, and also the South Polar regions. And this has been a bone of contention for many years, because if you want to be ridiculed, you just mention in a public place or in a public forum on radio and television that UFOs could be coming from the hollow earth. And they'll scratch their heads and say, what are you talking about, hollow earth? We've been all taught in school that the earth is a solid sphere. And yet we find books, pamphlets, references, some by scientists, others by researchers, others by military individuals, claiming on the stack of Bibles that they have ample evidence that would be accepted in any court in any country that some UFO sightings are valid, as seen coming out of and going into the North and the South Pole. We even have books like The Hollow Earth Mystery by Dr. Bernard, or The Smoky God, written by a Norwegian gentleman who he and his son were caught up in some kind of vortex, and their small sailing boat accidentally was caught in a storm, and they woke up and found themselves on the inside of the planet Earth. And they lived among the people who stood about 15 feet tall. You say, people 15 foot tall? How many of you have ever been to Watusi Land in Africa? You'll find them from 12 feet tall. Just like in the Pygmy district of Africa, you'll find very, very small statured individuals, you see. So, even though the Old Testament says in those days there were giants in the land, there are still giants in the land. The next hypothesis, perhaps we could call the progressive deceit and delusion hypothesis. It's been stated that certain individuals, whom they represent, no one knows. But certain individuals have the wherewithal, they have the hardware, they have the technology, they have the knowledge, they have the scientific ability to project a flying saucer image from one place to another to give the illusion that people are seeing a flying saucer. What is that projection called? Hologram. How many of you have ever known of holograms? And actually, you can see a hologram when it's properly operated, and you would see the image, and the image is so real that you want to reach out and touch it, as though the thing were solid. But it's not. You can put your hand right through it. And we understand that holography is going to become one of the sciences of the future, and it's being so constructed that it'll replace your television very shortly. How many of you have heard that? And Japan is working on it now. The things that I saw in Japan, you wouldn't believe. I saw a television set about 3 inches wide. Picture tube and all that you could hang on the wall, with the picture is as clear as a bell. But they say we cannot import this into the United States or Canada or Great Britain because we've put their television industry out of work entirely. But the devices that man has been capable of conceiving and producing are just beyond our wildest dreams. Now, who is operating these holographic projections, and to what extent these projections are utilized is beyond anybody's wildest dream. Some pilots, and we've interviewed many pilots in our investigations committee activities, they said we saw what appeared to be a huge flying saucer shaped like a bell, similar to the Adamski pictures. And these pilots and the co-pilot and the radio man, they said we were terrified because the thing appeared so suddenly that we didn't have a chance to bank to the left or to the right or up or down, but we just closed our eyes and said a quick couple of Hail Marys and went right through the thing. And nothing came of it. They said we saw something. We know something was there, and how in the world that thing was projected, they have no idea. And this is happening, and for some reason, we don't know who is behind all this, but it's also under investigation. The next hypothesis is called the unknown terrestrial life hypothesis. We're talking about the plasmic theory, the electrical theory, and the theory of pure energy. Now you take a room full of scientists and you pose certain questions of this nature to them, and they'll come up with some very, very fascinating answers. Now, the astronauts from Atlantis hypothesis has been very, very popular, not only among serious researchers, but also among people who are investigating UFOs as a way of life. Now, there are many pseudo-spiritual groups, pseudo-scientific groups, that they can give you practically any answer to questions you would have regarding Atlantis as well as Lemuria. How many of you believe that Atlantis did exist at one time? Let's see your hands. How about Lemuria? You've heard of that continent also? They say that before the end of the world comes, which somebody said it was going to end 3 years ago, so they sold all their property and climbed on top of a mountain in Northern California, where UFOs were supposed to come and take them up off of this planet, but nothing happened, so they had to go back home and try to reclaim their homes and the cars they sold, and some people sold their children. Did you read that in your paper? They sold their children. Anything, I don't know why they sold everything, because they claimed they were on the top of the mountain waiting for the end of the world with their pockets bulging with money. I don't know where they expected to use that currency. Very interesting hypothesis indeed. But then there's a strange hypothesis called time travel. How many of you believe that time travel will someday become a reality? Now, some of you swept your hands up so fast, I don't know. Let me see your hands again. Time travel. How many of you would like to time travel? Let's put it that way. May I ask you a question? Where would you want to go? I want 3 people, quickly. Go up to the microphone. 3 people who are interested in time travel, tell me where you'd like to go and why. Go ahead, right now. There's one. Let me see another one. Get right behind me so we don't lose any time. Go ahead, sir.
I think it would be very interesting to be about only 100 years age and to see what happens then. Just in also 100 years.
100 years?
Is enough.
Who else? Is he the only one of the time travelers in our audience that would like to admit where you want to go? How many people would like to visit the past? How far in the past, sir? Back to Rome. Why Rome? Just because you'd like to see it. That's a good answer. Anybody else? Where would you like to go? Could you travel in time? Yes, sir. Now that's a good answer. Back to biblical days. May I ask you why? You'd like to see about Ezekiel? That's good. Who else? Go ahead. Way in the universe. You'd like to go as far as possible just to see what's going to happen. How many of you, let's qualify, how many of you would like to go in the past? And how many of you would like to go into the future? Have any of you felt underneath your chair and found the 2 switches? No, please, don't panic. Question, how many of you are satisfied where you are? 1, 2, 3, 3.5. Kinda. Very interesting. And yet some UFOs, according to experts, are able to travel into the past and into the future. and then come back. I wonder what would happen if the governments of the world would pool their resources and pool their information and pool their wealth in an effort to come up with answers to this very unusual question regarding unidentified flying objects. We'd find out all kinds of things. The next hypothesis is the interdimensional travel. Now, we have witnesses by the score who claim that they have seen UFOs that are only half there. They see them coming into this dimension from another dimension, or from this dimension going into another dimension. Have you ever heard of interdimensional people, people who live between the ticks of the clock? I've heard that at Harvard University. I also heard it at the university in Florida, in Gainesville University, where serious-minded scientists are trying to find whether there is an invisible entity around us who are skipping in and out of another dimension. Very, very interesting hypothesis indeed. The next one is the planetary poltergeist. How many of you saw the picture Poltergeist? Did you enjoy it? Was it scary, as they say? It was. You think I'd be scared? You think so? I'll have to see it. How many of you have ever seen a poltergeist or the effects of a poltergeist? Anybody? One? Two? Anybody else? Were they mischievous poltergeists or friendly ones? Mischievous. Did they raise all kinds of Cain? They did. Would you mind telling us a little bit about it? Go right to the mic. The reason I want you to go to the mic is because I want everyone to receive benefit from some of your answers. Who's the other one said you saw a poltergeist? You, sir? I see. All right. Tell us about it.
Well, just back in younger years, I was 13 or 12 years old. My parents had gone out for the evening. I was alone in the house and sort of nervously trying to get to sleep. And the door of my bedroom opened, the light came on, and I was poked rather soundly in the ribs, frozen to the spot. And I turned my head around, and just at the moment of turning my head, the lights went out and the door closed. And I know there was no one in the house. And if that's what the explanation is behind a poltergeist, then that's what I believe. But that's what I experienced anyways.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. All right. The next category is very unique, which has been very carefully enlarged upon by not only the members who evaluated the congressional hearing on UFOs, but also a certain segment within Project Blue Book, the Air Force's official investigation. Incidentally, someone asked me last night, you were speaking, you were talking up a storm, and all of a sudden you stopped and looked at someone in the second row. Why did you stop? I said, did I stop? She said, yes, you sure did. Did someone scare you? I said, no, the fellow's taping the program, and I gave him a chance to turn the tape over, that's all. Oh, she says, thank God. Are we ready? Very good. And this other section, which was carefully evaluated by a group within the Project Blue Book, which of course you know is the Air Force's group assigned to investigate UFOs, they say there is a psychic need hypothesis. What's psychic need? Some people, they've got to have an unusual, a strange experience of any description. They've got to see something, they've got to know something, they've got to be involved in something, and naturally we've got this hypothesis that's called the psychic need hypothesis. People need to see giants, fairies, giants in their homes or in the back pasture, signs in the sky. They've got to see these things. They've got to see signs in the cloud. They've got to see the Virgin Mary. They've got to see little elves or little people. And their life is not complete until they have what they call a supernatural experience. Have you ever met people like that? I have found that many religious people are more prone to see UFOs than non-religious people. We have some sweet souls in Southern California, in the Los Angeles area. You probably don't have anyone like that around here. But they see UFOs every day at 12 o'clock noon. Rain or shine, smog or fog. They see their UFO at 12 o'clock noon. And they'll swear on a stack of Bibles and they'll slap your face if you call them a liar. They've got to see something. And there are other people that if they don't see something, they force themselves to see something. Can I tell you a little story? I didn't plan on telling you this, but I'm going to tell it to you anyhow. When I was in Bible college many years ago, we walked around the campus, and our school was way out in the boondocks, way out in the middle of a farm where nothing was except cows and tall grass. And our dormitories, men's and women's dormitory, the office facilities, the administration halls, the classroom and the chapel, and then there was one outdoor auditorium, well, without a roof. They called it a thatched roof. And they were in the process of putting on a new roof. They called it the old arbor, brush arbor. And there was one gentleman who used to be one of the major custodians of the school, and every morning, rain or shine, there he was, working his head off. And he worked hard all day long. And then toward evening, just prior to the evening chapel hour, which took place at 8 o'clock, he got to this brush arbor at 7 o'clock. And he would sit on the third row. That was his chair. That was his seat. And he'd fold his hands like this, and he'd look up at that brush arbor ceiling. He used to say, "I see Jesus. I see Jesus." That's all he'd say. "I see Jesus." Well, my roommate, he was the ex-Marine flyer who spotted flying saucers sometime before that. He said, "Frank, let's show that fellow. Let's meet his need. Let's grant his desire for him." I said, "What do you want to do?" He said, "Get the ladder behind the chapel and that bucket of water over there, and let's show him his vision." And he had a searchlight in his back pocket, too. I held the ladder. I did not climb up there. I held the ladder. That's all I did. And he climbed up, and I handed him up this cold bucket of water. And he got on top of this brush arbor, and he separated some of the leaves up there, and he shone down the searchlight right in this poor man's face. And he was sitting there. "I see it. Holy smoke. I see something. Lord, I see something. Lord, I want to see more. Give me all of this blessing, Lord." As I said, I held the ladder, but he poured the water. And this poor fellow let out a Comanche war whoop you wouldn't believe. And he cussed a little bit, too. The next day, we were both hauled up before the principal, but I told him all I did was hold the ladder. This man wanted to see something so bad that we tried to help him. And likewise in the UFO field, some people, they go around and everything they see in the sky, "Hey, there's a flying saucer from Jupiter." And all it is a high-flying Canadian goose. And they force themselves. Well, when you're riding in an airplane, I'm a pilot. We see, believe me, if you're a pilot, you see strange things, especially if you fly at night. And they're almost impossible to catalog. You don't know what they are. A strange light way in the distance. You don't know what it is. It could be another plane. It could be a helicopter. It could be a kite. It could be a balloon with a light attached to it. It could be anything. And you cannot enter that information into your log and say, "I saw a flying saucer from Mars." It wouldn't be correct. You'd be fooling yourself, and you'd be fooling other people to whom you related the incident. But when a cigar-shaped vehicle with a double row of lights with fire shooting out the back of it pulls alongside of your TWA plane, and the light begins to pulsate, and your passengers start fainting one by one, then you have reasonable doubt that it is not a Canadian goose. You see? And then all of a sudden, you're plagued by investigators, and they want to know all about your sighting. But as a pilot of a commercial airline, many of their tongues have been silenced. Their mouths have been closed by force, not directly, but psychologically, indirectly. Case in point, the congressional hearing, 1968. There was a man there by the name of Dr. Sidney Walker III. I had the pleasure of meeting this gentleman some years ago, and I appeared on the Michael Jackson radio show, KABC, in Los Angeles. And Dr. Sidney Walker is such a fine gentleman in his own medical office that I never thought him capable of a report that came out in the congressional hearing. First of all, if you are a pilot, according to Sidney Walker III, you may think that you saw something, but as long as the Air Force is signing my check, I'm going to show you reasons that you didn't see anything unusual. Case in point, Eastern Airlines pilot between New York and Chicago. The pilot saw a UFO. He got so excited that he nudged his co-pilot and said, "Look at that thing. I've never seen anything like it before. It's not a helicopter. It's not a conventional plane. It has no wings, no rudders, just a bell-shaped, unidentified object. It looks like a bell. That's as close as I can identify it. And look what it's doing." Where did it go? It zipped over the plane to the right side of the plane, and then it shot ahead of the plane at breakneck speed, pulled in front of the plane, stopped dead, and the pilot thought he'd have to pull his plane out of the way, but the object instead zipped up. The plane went by, and the object went toward the tail of the plane, and then came back on the pilot side of the plane. Now, flying at an altitude, I believe, of 20,000 feet. Airspeed was about, at that time, 400 to 450 miles per hour. He told his superiors about this. They said, "You've got to tell the Air Force." The Air Force investigators merged on this fellow, converged on him, brought him to Dr. Sidney Walker III, the psychiatrist. The psychiatrist told him, "Now, take your shoes off." I don't know why they had him take his shoes off. They said, "Take your shoes off, be comfortable, and sit down here, and I'll be right back." And they looked at him through this little window, and he started tapping his pencil. And then the pilot put the pencil down and started looking around at the room, and felt for cigarettes. He was a heavy smoker, but he couldn't find any. Instead, he pulled out a stick of gum. By that time, Sidney Walker came back into the room and handed him a questionnaire. He said, "Please fill out this questionnaire. I'll be back in a few moments." He looked at this questionnaire, the past history of my family, a review of any medical systems, a review of my past medical examination, a summary of any sicknesses or diseases I've had in the past, whether or not I have ever had any trouble with my eyesight or with my hearing, what my visual acuity is, whether my color vision is impaired in any way, shape, manner, or form, whether I've ever had anemia, what is my present mental status, and they go on and on. He turns the page, list your childhood diseases, list your hospitalizations and operations, list your past illnesses in detail. Have you ever taken drugs? And they have a little word here called sleep ease, aspirin, cough medicine, and then a complete family history, a complete social history, a review of his nervous system, and by the time that pilot turns to page 3, he wonders what in the world is going on. Dr. Sidney Walker comes back into the room, looks at the application. The pilot's only filled out his name, address, city, state, whatever. And the doctor says, so you think that you've seen a UFO? Yes, sir. Would you kindly describe it? Which he did. Are you sure that it was a flying object, a flying saucer? Yes, I'm sure it was. Incidentally, where do you fly? I fly between New York and Chicago. And Dr. Sidney Walker opens up his notebook, New York to Chicago. Do you lay over for several days in Chicago? Yes, I do. What hotel do you stay at in Chicago? And for how many days? Oh, generally 3 days. Oh, yes. And what is that girl's name that stays with you in Chicago? And the pilot looks at Dr. Sidney Walker, who's nothing but a blackmailer paid by the United States Air Force to ask these questions. The next question, are you sure you saw a UFO? And the pilot stands up, takes the application, tears it in many pieces, and says, you know, Dr. Walker, I never saw no UFO. Of course not. It was probably a goose or a high flying something. It may have even been a speck in my eye. Goodbye, Dr. Walker. And out he goes. And the thing that infuriated the Congress of the United States, the gentlemen who conducted this investigation into the UFO phenomenon, they were furious because hundreds, I repeat, hundreds of airline pilots in a 12-month period in the United States were brought before Sidney Walker III, and they were discouraged and blackmailed to such an extent that they tore up their reports. Their UFO sightings are not on any record today, and we as UFO investigators have lost. We have lost valuable information that could have been given to us by qualified million-mile pilots who cannot afford to make mistakes. How many of you agree? Say aye. This is one thing I'm opposed to. And when I spoke to Gerald Ford when he was President of the United States, he was the only one who supported our committee in open congressional hearings. Barry Goldwater, another one, who supported open congressional hearings, that all the facts, figures, names, and dates and places could be presented before the public. But no, sir. General Nathan Twining said, no, sir. General Whitmire at the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. says, no, sir, that people might panic. And then news filtered out of the Pentagon by certain individuals who said, now look here, strangers, listen here. You're talking about UFOs, you're talking about this clown from the planet Venus. You're saying that there's life as we know it in outer space. You're making all kinds of allegations. They said, what in the hell is wrong with you? Do you want to mass panic the whole world? I said, no, the only one who's panicking around here is you. General Whitmire looked at me very carefully. He says, now look, I'm going to tell you a big secret. And that secret was so big that I'm going to tell you what he said. He said, if, now I'm not saying I agree with you, but if a man can come from another world, strike that, a being, he said, if a being could come from another planet and show us how to get along without sickness, listen please, without disease, without death, if he could show us how to drop a pill in an automobile tank full of water and suddenly transform that substance into a combustible material, and I was thinking to myself, he's read all my books. And if they can tell us how to get along without all these things, plus how to get along without death, and he looked me square down his long nose, he said, you, Frank, strangers will be responsible for ruining the economy of our nation. I looked at him and blinked my big brown eyes at him. And he says, you don't know what I'm talking about. Get the hell out of here. Which I did. Ladies and gentlemen, we're dealing with nothing that can be associated with a crackpot French. But I will say this with all my heart, that the day is coming very, very soon that no power on the face of this earth, no negative force on the face of this earth, no political system, no Air Force, no intelligence agency on the face of God's green earth is going to be able to hold the truth back from the people of the world who want to know the truth. And believe me when I say the day is coming soon when those millions of people who today are walking down the canyons of ignorance, fear, and superstition are going to walk down the highway of truth. How many of you believe that? Say aye. All right. One other thing while I'm hot and bothered. Some years ago, I stood next to the bed of the late Dick Powell in Santa Monica, California. Dick Powell had read my book, Saucerama, heard about Val Thor, and he was dying of cancer, a most devastating disease. And he gripped my hand 7 hours before he died, and he said, "Frank, I wish to God I didn't have to die. There's so much I want to do, so many places I want to go, so many new people I want to meet. I want to make more movies. I want to contribute something more to the human family." And he said, "I'm so sorry that I've got to die because of this damnable cancer." Ladies and gentlemen, what would you do if I told you that we have had a cure for cancer in the United States for at least 20 years? How many of you have heard of that before? And they told us in Washington that you shouldn't make statements like that in public, so I won't make it tonight. They said you shouldn't alarm people. Did you know that one of the greatest rackets today are people involved in the cancer fund? How many of you knew that? And other devastating diseases. And they said, if you come along with a cure for cancer, the drug trust will have to take the gas pipe. Well, that's very possible. In fact, it's probable. But I believe in human beings. I believe in people. I believe in men and women and young people. I believe in children. And this is why I believe with all my heart that if there is one iota of evidence, tangible evidence, that we're going to get help from the stars, I think to close our minds, and to close our minds like a steel trap would be an abominable thing for any human being on this planet to do. But to maintain, rather, an open mind to the possibility that there are people from other worlds walking among us with an eye toward helping us. And that would, I don't find anything wrong in it, not even in the Scriptures. In the Scriptures, the people from other worlds constantly help members of the human family. Are you aware of that? And were it not for some space people today that are vacuuming the air around some of our atomic plants because they're leaking into the atmosphere, you and I would have many, many more medical problems today than we already have. How many of you know that to be fact? All right. Now that I've cooled off a little bit, I'll go on. There's a hypothesis called the supernatural hypothesis. Individuals from space are called messengers from God. They're called angels. They're called spiritual guides for mankind to follow. On Sunday afternoon, because it irks some people when I give the spiritual application of space people, on Sunday afternoon at 2:30, we're going to go into this more thoroughly. If I may also add, on Sunday afternoon, I'm going to give you the option to receive a small card. On that card, you're going to be able to write 3 questions of your own choice, and I will answer those 3 questions for you, questions pertaining to yourself. The reality game hypothesis also made the documents of the Central Intelligence Agency secret forms. And the reality game hypothesis went something like this: to raise up man's super consciousness to his ultimate awareness. Let me read that for you once more. To raise up man's superconsciousness to ultimate awareness. Now let that sink in for a few days, and we'll talk more about that on Sunday. Now, people have asked the questions time and again, what do these UFOs look like? What are they like? How many of you have never seen a UFO? Raise your hands again, please. All right, listen to this, please. UFOs are sometimes, they take the shape of a flat disc, like a coin, shaped like a coin. Others are saucer-shaped or convex lens-shaped, manned and unmanned. Every UFO you see in the sky is not a manned vehicle. Many of these are unmanned. Some of them are like scout ships, very similar to the bell-shaped type as you saw on the Adamski pictures last evening. Some are like a bubble platter with no landing gear. Others are like Saturn, look like a wheel within the wheel, very similar to that described by the prophet Ezekiel, of the first chapter of Ezekiel of the Old Testament. Others are like a globe or a hemisphere, a round ball. Others are like a flattened sphere. Others are like a double globe with a double set of windows. These have been seen and photographed in places like London, England, also many sightings of this nature in Australia. Another shape in Australia, as well as the US and Canada, UFOs that are shaped like a top, like a toy top you used to play with when you were a child. Others are shaped like a football, similar to the one that was sighted in Sarasota, Florida some years ago when I was driving down to a ministerial convention, and this huge football was glowing red over the orange field toward the Atlantic Ocean. And it stopped traffic for many, many miles. 2 Greyhound loads of people stopped along with many truckers. They got out of their vehicles. They were looking at this great big red football, and it started to pulsate rapidly, turned a brilliant red, and shoot over the Atlantic Ocean. And it left many, many people standing there wondering what in the world they saw. Other shapes, triangle, teardrop, dumbbell shaped, drum shaped, pentagon shaped, shaped like a cylinder, a cigar, like a straw hat, similar to the one taken by the highway commissioner in Santa Ana, California. It looked like a big straw hat sitting up in the sky. Others shaped like a beehive. If you ever see a UFO shaped like a beehive, don't ever go near that type of object. If you see it on the ground, go the other direction. Because it's the beehive-shaped UFOs that have caused problems all over the world. There are some UFOs shaped like a gyroscope, others shaped like a star, 5-pointed star or a 6-pointed star. And then there are many colored lights. Some are bright, some are dull, some are very dim. Others are shaped like what we would call fireballs during the Second World War. They were plagued with fireballs rolling along the top of their wings. It terrified the pilots. And then shaped like a triangle. Now in the daytime, colors of UFOs are chrome, aluminum, stainless steel, metallic, milky colored, red, and black. Nighttime sightings primarily look like red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, gold, and white. Some years ago, if you saw a UFO and you wrote to the Air Force, they would send you a questionnaire, an official questionnaire. Now, this questionnaire always made me laugh. They say these UFOs do not exist, but if you see one, give us a full report, because we want to keep it in our files. And when you receive it, the instructions were, fill in just the primary questions. Name, address, city, state, telephone, place of employment, occupation, education. And then the location of the observation. A lot of people wrote for these before they had a UFO sighting because the instructions were to keep it in your pocket until you see something and then stand there and fill out the questionnaire. And in one section, section 12, did the object appear to stand still at any time, suddenly speed up, break up, explode, break into parts, give off smoke, leave a visible trail, drop anything, change brightness, change shape, change color. And the other section, 17, was it fuzzy or blurred, like a bright star, or was it sharply outlined? And then the next section, was it self-luminous, dull finish, reflecting, transparent? What? The thing we're telling you does not exist. But my favorite is question 20. They said if you're standing on the corner, stand still, do not get excited, remain calm. Slowly raise your arm, slowly elevate your thumb. Close one eye, like that, see? Open the other real wide, and find the object if it's still there. This is to help you determine an approximate size of the object. Now, I don't know what your local police department's going to do while you're standing on the corner like this. But you be sure to tell them. And then they say, quickly grab your pen and check one. Was it the size of a pinhead, a green pea, a dime, a nickel, a half a dollar, a silver dollar? Then they move over to the fruit department. Orange, grapefruit, watermelon. Amazing. So many questions about something that does not exist. And yet, many people filled out the questionnaire and were very careful to send in what they thought they saw. Now, last night, I promised you information about the 5 TPM Avenger torpedo bombers that left Fort Lauderdale on December the 5th, 1945. Do you remember that? That seems to be a classic in UFO history. Very little information has ever been found, accurate official information has ever been found on this. As you know, the planes left in clear weather, not a cloud in the sky. The 5 planes completely vanished. After that, they sent out a marine flying boat, a mariner flying boat, to look for the other planes, to see whether there was any wreckage or any oil slick on the water, and that plane vanished. Prior to that, from 1961 to 1970, in the Bermuda Triangle, these were the following losses as reported by Lloyd's of London. 2,766 shipping losses, 1,136 by wrecking, 771 by foundering, and 70 ships vanished in the triangle, completely vanished. No trace whatsoever. Now, I went down to Fort Lauderdale. You know, sometimes you can't take everybody's word for what you hear. I like to go to the source. How many of you believe that way? I went down to Fort Lauderdale, contacted the United States Coast Guard people who are responsible for releasing the reports of the disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle. And luckily, I got there after the offices were closed. I got there at 7 p.m. I had an inkling to go there after they closed, after the official executive offices closed at 5 o'clock. So at 7 o'clock, I'm knocking at the back door at the Coast Guard station in Fort Lauderdale, and a very nice young man came out and let me in. He said, "Yes, sir, may I help you?" I said, "My name is Frank Strangers. I'm speaking over here at the Assembly of God Church in Fort Lauderdale, and I'd like to ask you a few questions about these planes that disappeared so many years ago into the Triangle." "Oh," he said, "you know, those records are so far gone that I wouldn't know where to tell you to look for them." And yet there was a twinkle in his eye that I knew that if I pressed him just a little bit more, he may come up with an answer. I said, "You know, there are so many strange and unusual things that happen over the water at night as well as by day. And I'm gathering information. I'm writing a book on this, and I'd appreciate if you helped me." I said, "You look like such a fine young man." I said, "Captain?" He said, "No, I'm not a captain." I said, "I'm sorry." He said, "Come on in, doggone it, come on in." And he locked the door behind him. And we walked into an office. And he said, you know, I've really taken up with your sincerity. I don't know what it is, or whether you're handing me a line of bull, I don't know. But he said, I have an idea that you're really honest in your heart to ask these questions. I said, yes. He said, well, I'm going out for a smoke. And if I went out for a smoke, you would not go into that bottom drawer in the corner, would you? I said, God have mercy. That's government property. I said, come to think of it, I am the government. Of the people, for the people, and by the people. He said, yeah, oh, God have mercy on you, he said. I said, the bottom drawer on the left or on the right? He said, now, the one on the right is just as classified as the one on the left. That contains all kinds of disappearance information. And do you know, as God is my witness, he reached into his pocket and unlocked that drawer. And he said, I'm going out for a smoke. I said, take your time. Smoke 2 of them. And he went out. Now, normally, you'd expect me to say, with fear and trembling, I opened that drawer. No. I rushed to the drawer and yanked it open. And I noticed it started at 1969, 68, 67, 66, 65. I pulled the file drawer out just a little more. 63, 59, 50, 43, 46, 45, December 5th, 1945. Jackpot! I must admit that I looked around over my shoulder. Nobody was there. I heard a car pull up outside and then pull away again. And then I picked out one lone white sheet of paper, double-spaced, that contains the following information. The only thing I can do for you tonight is to read you the copy that I made on the government copy machine of the report. Now, I did not have permission to use the machine, but I did leave a dime on top of it when I left. This is what I read. At the top of the page, classified top secret. Then I knew, as a member of the government, I had a right to read it. But you know, it made me a bit angry because information like this has never been leaked to the press. And it would set a lot of people's minds at ease if they would receive such information. I don't know what you're going to do with this information, but I'm going to give it to you anyhow. At the top of the page, disappearance 5-12. They put the month first. The day, 1945. And the next word, disappearance. After a brief summary of the disappearance and the names, the ranks, and the addresses, the home addresses of these individuals who disappeared in these airplanes, there was a certain section beneath that called radio transmissions. Now, there were 5 radio transmissions. Here they are. Number 1, report. Now, this is the transmissions that came only from the first 5 planes that disappeared, the 5 TBM Avengers. Number 1, report of the most beautiful music ever heard by human ears. What in the world could that possibly mean? I'm not interpreting this for you tonight. I'm giving you the facts. Second transmission, report, dash. Please do not look for us. You are wasting your time. Turn to God and enjoy life to the fullest. The next transmission that came through 30 seconds later, please tell our loved ones we are not dead but have just begun to live. The next transmission, this is so wonderful we want to cry. Transmission 5, friends from space are here to help us. We now live in the skies. What are you going to do with a report like that? Believe me, when I copied this, I was very concerned because when this took place, the parents and the loved ones and the wives of these men were in such a state of remorse that it was not funny. 7 days after this reached my files, either by design or by coincidence, and some of you may have read this in your paper, the parents and the loved ones left behind by these missing pilots were called in by President Truman. Does anyone remember reading anything? Yeah. They were called in by President Truman. And they went in there with their children. They were crying, they were tearing. I got this directly from the mouth of the Secret Service. They spent 1 full hour with the President, and then they emerged from his office, and they were smiling. They were smiling. Some of the reporters caught wind that they were there, and they were waiting. One from the Washington Post was even outside. They said, please tell us, what did the President say to you? And one lady said, wouldn't you like to know? He said, damn right I'd like to know. What did he say? She says, I'm sorry, we've been sworn to secrecy. And they were all smiles when they came out of President Truman's office. One more thing before I change the subject. I peeked at another page. Underneath this page, which was entitled, recorded by the United States Coast Guard Control Center, Radio Control Center, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, December the 5th, 1945. These are the 3 transmissions. 1, relax, we have full control of your airships. The second transmission, your engine failure has been caused by a negative vortex. How many of you have ever heard of a negative vortex? The third transmission, you will lose consciousness for a few moments during the transition. Then you will have several options open to you all. Let go of your controls. You have no control over your vehicle now. Relax. We are helping you. When I read this, I began to quiver. And I turned the next page, but it was something altogether different. So that's all the information I required. I shoved that thing closed. By that time, he walked back into the room. He said, I'm sorry that I took so long. I said, bless your heart, did you have a good smoke? He said, yes, I smoked 2 of them. He saw the light was still on the copy machine. He said, you didn't? I said, I did. Then I paid for it. There's a dime up there. He shook my hand. He said, please, forget this visit tonight. Forget my name. Forget me. God bless you, he said. Goodbye. And out I went, and I have never seen him from that day to this. Now I ask you, do you believe that if this information would have been released by the President or by the military, that the people of the Americas, including Canada and every other nation on the earth, do you think the people would have panicked? I would like to have some of your input on this. What do you think the reaction of the world would be? Slip your hand up. Get behind the microphone, please. Tell me.
In my opinion, I think it would be the worst day for all politicians on earth. You would get bankrupt.
You think so?
I'm sure.
Okay. Anyone else want to make a comment? My question, please. What would be your reaction? What would be your opinion of the reaction of the world if this would have been made public at that time? Go, please.
The one thing I was going to say is there's a lot of people who don't like living in the situation that they're living in. It could cause a problem where a lot of these people would say, hey, maybe I could just be freed and I'll be all right, so let's just take off and go and try to get away and try to be picked up by one of these Islands or whatever. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. Very good. Anybody else? Please go back to the mic. Anybody else want to make a comment? Please go back to the mic now, so we'll save some time. Go ahead. Ladies first. Anybody else? Please stand now or forever hold your peace.
I think that for many years people might have suspected something like this and that there would be a relief, a great relief by a lot of people. But real quick, I'd like to ask you, did you ever find out why this help was offered them? Were they in trouble?
Yes, because the plane was caught in the vortex and their engines cut.
Was that for all of them, all the ships and the planes?
Every ship. The 5 ships, including the flying marine boat.
And the ships, the planes that have disappeared, did they dematerialize?
I have no idea.
Thank you.
A question regarding the interview with President Truman.
Yes.
You claimed that these people came out smiling and so on,
Yes.
and I have no way of contesting or
Yes.
that. I take that on face value.
Yes.
I still am a little concerned personally I suppose we're all imagining that what they were told by President Truman was that what you quoted from this document, or words to that effect. Is that right?
This is pure conjecture. They were told, whatever they were told caused them to come out smiling.
I shouldn't have said, is that right? What I meant
Yes.
isn't that...
It's if you're asking my opinion, I'll give you my opinion.
Rhetorically speaking,
Yes.
is that not what we're assuming they came out knowing?
We're assuming that the President of the United States told them something that made them very, very happy. And the best thing that would have made me happy as a parent was to know that my son was in good hands. My son was in a better state than some of the people living on the earth.
That's very commendable, and I don't want to dispute that. However, I still have some problem accepting that these people, to a man, would come out totally blissful. No matter even, for example, if you think of your own, well, I guess I'll think of my own situation. Close friends, relatives, wife, and so on. On one level, I think I would, if I were told such blissful kind of
Yes.
information, I might be happy, all right.
Yes.
On another level, I'm sure I would be more than distraught, because I don't think I would have quite been able to lead it there. You know?
Yes.
What is the future, and where are they, and how am I to carry on, for instance? There are other matters to be taken into account.
Yes.
Some of these people undoubtedly would be left as orphans, and the children, some of them, you know, there would be
Yes.
other circumstances.
Bear in mind that as a military family who lost an individual under those conditions, that the government of the United States would underwrite their support 100%. So there'd be no financial hardship on the families.
All right, but then there's still that element of quote-unquote loss.
Right. Which always exists. All right? Go ahead.
Well, before I answer the question that you began with, I just mentioned if I was told by President Truman that the story of which was told to these parents, I think it would make me quite happy, because a lot of people who are maybe ignorant of the fact maybe of life after death or something like that, they may have this concept that their loved ones are lost forever and they don't know where they are. And I think it would really console me a bit to know that they, you know, they're at least maybe in the hands of somebody who is taking care of them and that they aren't really lost forever. And back to your question about what do you think the world would react to, I feel that the world would react in a positive way. They would really think that it was, I think it would just help to make people realize that there is such a thing maybe as life on other planets. And I think maybe that's why it was told to be, you know, kept secret, because you know, people would then start believing in these things, especially if it was endorsed by the government, and all the things you've mentioned previously of what they would lose pertaining to the economy, and not listening, not believing that the president of the country is, you know, the end all of the leader of the world sort of. You'll realize that there's more advanced beings, a lot smarter than maybe the president of a country.
Yes.
I could see them keeping it quiet.
Thank you very much. Let's give these people a good hand. These are excellent comments. I appreciate everything that you said on. That's wonderful. All right. I have one other bit of information before we have our intermission and refreshments tonight. And this is going to throw some of you too. You see, things happen in history, especially, let's confine this to UFO history, that when something happens, you and I are given a reason by the authority, by the powers that be, to try to answer the cause, give an account for why a certain thing happened. Now, I don't know about Canada, but some countries, some governments, let me qualify that by saying some governments feel very strongly, and it's been stated many times, that there comes a time that the government must lie to the people for their own good. How many of you have heard that before? When it comes to national security, some governments believe that they can take license to either stretch or bend the truth or distort the truth so you may sleep better at night. I'm not of that makeup. My metabolism rebels against deception. How about you? Say aye. Aye. If there's another interpretation, if there's another meaning, if there's another reason for something that has happened that has not been presented to me, I would like to know what that reason is. Simply because, as a human being, I believe I'm of a sound mind. I would like the option of determining for myself what I choose to believe and what I choose not to believe. And I cannot make this choice until I have all available evidence. Does that make sense to you? I don't like disharmony. How many of you know what disharmony is? One hand? Two hands? You don't know what disharmony is? Mind your mouth. That's not harmony. How long did you spend that? This is not harmony. Watch this. Is that harmony? No. That's a single note. That's going on one cylinder. Is this harmony? No. Is this harmony? No. Is this harmony? Ah. You've got C and you've got E. Is that harmony? Is this more harmony? How about this? Harmony? We've got to have harmony in the world. We've got to have harmony in research. We've got to have harmony among researchers. The UFO field has a few... Oh, forget that. I don't want to talk about that. But the UFO field needs a little more harmony. We all need to relate in a more harmonious way. When it comes to investigating and probing and searching, God help us to get as much factual information as we possibly can. And then we'll have harmony. When I receive a report such as I'm going to give you, because I'm anxious to get to the bottom of things, I consider the source of my information. If one comes to me and gives me a bit of information and he has a record of being a liar, I cannot put much credence in what he said. On the platform in Mainz, West Germany, Professor Herman Oberth put his hand on my shoulder and he says, you know, UFOs are out there. And they're not made here in this planet. I take it from the mouth of an authority. He knows what in the world he's talking about. So I'm going to let this soak into you for just a few minutes. And I'm going to tell you what actually happened to the body of Captain Thomas Mantell. And I received this information not from any earthly source. And you can take it for what it's worth. You can believe it, you can disbelieve it, you can put your finger in your nose or in your ear, anything you want to do. But after the intermission, the first thing we'll do when we come back, I'm going to give you these. And judging from the number of calls that have come in as a result of the 6 o'clock news, which went on at 5 minutes to 7, the segment involving the interview that they did with us this afternoon, judging from the number of calls, if you plan to be with us tomorrow night, I suggest you get here bright and early and get a good front seat, because we're going to have a crowd. Tomorrow night we're showing 2 motion pictures. One is a silent picture that was given to me by Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena that shows our satellite going out into deep space. There's no sound, no color, there's plenty of color, no sound, no music, just that very short 5-minute film, which we brought because I thought you'd enjoy seeing such a historical film. The other film is called Flying Saucers Here and Now, which is in full color music, the whole bit involving UFOs. And in this particular film, you're going to see UFOs that have never been published any place, any time. And I'm sure that you'll find that very fascinating. Also, the press media has asked me to go into detail concerning the stranger at the Pentagon in tomorrow night's session. We're also going to show a few slides of Val, what he looks like, and we'll relate exactly what's happening in that particular area today, 1982. And one thing I'd like to say about Sunday afternoon. If you plan to be with us on Sunday afternoon, I hope that you don't come alone, because it's going to be a very unique and unusual meeting. We're going to be talking about Val Thor again, about outwitting tomorrow, the secret of divine protection, and 5 keys to success and prosperity. How many of you are tired of being poor? Say aye. All right. If you want to take a chance on coming out Sunday afternoon and learn a few of these things that are so simple and so unique. You see, a lot of people can sit down and blast everybody and everything. Our government's no good, our president's worse, and my neighbor's a pain in the neck. And everything they say is condemning something or someone else. Within you lies the power to change yourself, to change your thinking, and to change things around you. You can directly affect things around you. How many of you believe that? Say aye. Now, I'm not supposed to preach in this seminar. Forgive me if I sound like I am. But there are certain things I want to tell you on Sunday afternoon that I'm not at liberty to tell a mixed crowd like this. Also, how many of you have ever heard the expression, well, I changed my mind? You've heard of that expression? No such thing. You have never changed your mind. Don't look at me in that tone of voice. You, I repeat, cannot change your mind. Why? Did you hear my tape? You only have one mind. How in the world can you change your mind? You change your thinking. So. I heard that in Germany so many times. They say, so. You change your thinking. You change your attitude. You change your outlook. And when you get tired of being sick and diseased and poor, you want to change your thinking. There's something within you. You have I shouldn't be telling you all this. You have the potential within you, if you know how to cut loose those powers, that within a very short time, you can actually see changes take place. Case in point, quickly. I'm glad you asked. We have a church in Van Nuys. It's an interdenominational church. We've got Catholics, Protestants, Jews, Buddhists, all kinds of people that come out to our meetings. And I've got one Jewish young lady who loves God so much, she said, please, I want to come to your church. I want to do everything I can because I feel I've got to help myself. Where are you working? I'm working down at Jack in the Box. You got those here? in Canada? Jack in the Box? Similar to McDonald's. You got a McDonald's? Every country's got a McDonald's. In Korea we found a McDonald's too. In Germany too we found McDonald's. But nevertheless, she said, I'm working at Jack in the Box. Well, how much are you earning? Well, do I have to tell you? Yeah, go ahead, just tell me. I won't say a word to a soul. Don't tell her I told you. She said, I'm making $1.75. You're kidding, $1.75? A young lady like you, a high school graduate? She said, that's the best job I can get. I said, wrong. She said, what do you mean? And then she came to some of our closed sessions. In the States, your closed session costs you anywhere between $20 and $25 because I only like to speak to people who mean business. I don't have time to waste. You don't have time to waste. If you want to have someone else come and tickle your ear and just make you feel good, you're coming to the wrong meeting on Sunday afternoon. If you want to hear the truth, come Sunday afternoon. Otherwise, stay home and watch the ball game. And you know what happened to that young lady? Her name is Madeline. This young lady went from one job to another. She looked herself in the mirror, told her a few things that I told her to tell herself in the mirror, addressing herself, loosening the potential within her, and today, that young lady makes about $11.75 an hour. And that's just one example of one of our members in our Los Angeles group. You can do the same thing. You say, but you don't know the economy. You don't know the power that lies within you. And I want you to tap those sources. And if it's worth this to you, to come out Sunday afternoon to learn some of the things that Val passed on to me, how to learn about the 5-point development of your life, the 5-pointed star, come Sunday afternoon, bring someone that you love with you, and it's going to make all the difference in the world. All this has been free, no charge at all. Okay, I promised to tell you about the Captain Thomas Mantell case. Again, you can take this or you can leave it. If you believe it's the truth, believe it. If you think it's a bold-faced lie, don't believe it. Is that fair enough? Now, how many of you want to hear this? All right, here it is. I am sorry that I may burst some of your balloons about the Thomas Mantell case. I've read all kinds of stories in various books and periodicals that are completely untrue. Here we go. January the 7th, 1948. You remember June 22nd, 1946? What happened that day? June 22nd, 1947, excuse me. What happened that day? Kenneth Arnold. Jim, do I have anything left to give you for your right answer? I'll owe you something. Kenneth Arnold saw what he called flying saucers. 9 saucer-shaped vehicles flying in an echelon formation. Everybody was excited. The entire civilized world was aware of the term flying saucers. Listen to this gentleman right here. Give him a copy of UFO Journal. This is the book that our investigations committee puts out that has quite a bit of information in it. All right, and then in January the 7th, 1948, according to many individuals, was the first recorded casualty associated with a UFO. Actually, it's the first recorded casualty, although there had been prior casualties down through history. You know that. 4 F-51 fighters approaching Godman Field, Fort Knox, Kentucky. Captain Thomas Mantell was the officer, the squadron leader. Flying at an altitude of 20,000 feet, they spotted an unidentified object that was about 250 feet in diameter. The control tower instructed the planes to give chase, get as close to the object as possible, and give us the full description. The other 3 planes, because for some unknown reason were short of fuel, had to land their planes. How many of you remember the story so far? All right. The radio messages between Captain Thomas Mantell and the radio tower went something like this. There were 4 messages in all. Number 1, it looks very large and metallic. Number 2, yes, I see windows. They look like round portholes. Number 3, I have never seen anything like this before in my life. Number 4, yes, I will try to get closer. I have my throttle clear out. Yes, I'm getting closer. Yes, I see shadowy forms behind the windows. Holy smoke, I see people. Question from the tower, what do they look like? Well, they look like, right at that point, his plane disintegrated into many bits and pieces that were found scattered over miles. Remember the story so far? All right. However, and this is a statement I made before the congressional hearing, this is the statement I made before the United Nations, this is the statement I made to the Federal Bureau of Investigation while being interrogated in New York City, when I got back from Washington, when I received this information, told it to the church in Washington, went to New York, the FBI wanted to know the source of my information, and this is the statement that stirred up a hornet's nest from New York to Washington. Here's the statement. However, no trace of his body has ever been found to this day. Go. You say, go on, they had a funeral. If you know, in any one given year, how many funerals are conducted in the United States in which no bodies reside in the casket, you'd have a hissing. I won't dare ask any of you if you have ever been involved in United States intelligence. Maybe some of you have. I wouldn't ask if some of you have been involved in Canadian intelligence, because if I did, you'd have to admit I'm telling the truth. There are people in the U.S. who, because they have testified before some Senate subcommittee, have been granted complete anonymity. They are so obscure they disappear seemingly from off of the face of the earth, even though they had a funeral for that individual a week later. And they're down in Arizona someplace, or Argentina, or in the Fiji Islands, sipping mint julep, reading their obituary in the New York newspaper. How many of you know that? There are people who have been involved in certain government secrets that, because of the sensitivity of the information, have been removed from the bosom of their home, leaving the family, leaving the wife, leaving the children, leaving the in-laws and the outlaws, leaving everybody. They individually are transported from their locale to an entirely different lifestyle with a new passport, and in many cases, not some cases, in many cases, complete plastic surgery has altered their appearance. How many of you have read things like, listen, this is true. In the intelligence community, they'd be the first ones to admit to you that should you decide to become a CIA agent, that if in the event you get caught or something slips up on your assignment, they will guarantee you anonymity. They will guarantee you that they will pull a disappearing act for you and for some people whom you choose to disappear with you. Now, not that this is what happened in Captain Thomas Mantell's case, because his plane blew up, and the last that the people saw was that plane in midair chasing a round metallic object, and suddenly a blinding flash of light, an explosion, and the next day the Air Force called a press conference. They said Captain Thomas Mantell was killed chasing the planet Venus. Astronomers, how many astronomers do we have here? Astronomers quickly pointed out within the next 48-hour period, and you'll read about that in my book, Strange at the Pentagon, when you get a hold of a copy. Venus was nowheres to be seen at that particular time in any portion of the sky until many, 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 many hours later. Now, why the military should say that Captain Thomas Mantell was killed chasing the planet Venus. They could have used any number of excuses. Why pick on Venus? Now, why should a planet leave its orbit to come down and hover in the sky above Fort Knox, Kentucky, to bump into one of our planes is beyond me. Now, the story behind the story is that he got a little too close to the force field around the UFO. You've heard of those cases before. Let me get down to some of the basics now. A message was picked up by the tower that was revealed again to the President of the United States at that time, and to a choice few members of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Let me stop there for just a moment. Denise and I were in a place called Lompoc, California. And the minister of the United Brethren Church, the United something or other church, invited us to speak at his church. He said, please come, talk on UFOs and the Bible. And he had a fairly large church. And he had a projection screen that you could almost carry in your pocket. It was so small, sitting up on the stage. Meeting was scheduled for 8 o'clock. At 7 o'clock, hundreds of people packed into that church. He said, my God, I only expected 25 people. And during the course of that particular meeting, I had occasion to show the slides, like I'm going to do tomorrow night, of Val Thor. And during the intermission, in that crowded auditorium, a gentleman and his wife sitting on the aisle, his hair was graying with age, and he came down the aisle. He was the first one to move out of his seat during the intermission. Reached into his pocket, pulled out his identification, showed it to me, and I couldn't help but notice what tears were running down his face. United States Air Force Intelligence, retired, with his full identification, photograph, thumbprint, number, section, the whole bit. He said, I want you to know, young man, I was at the Pentagon during the Eisenhower years. I was one of the officers in charge of the certain tests that were given to Val Thor's uniform, or his suit as he called it, while Mr. Thor was there. He said, I didn't know his name. We had a code name for him, and the code name consisted of two initials, VT, which he said, now I realize meant Val Thor. He said, when I looked at this man, he said, something came over me at the Pentagon that this man was not from this earth. He said, they only gave me fragmentary information about this individual. All they said, they didn't tell me he was claiming to be from another planet. They said, all that this man said was that, rather, all they told me about this man was that he's not from around here. And he said, you know, I had a burning headache. Do you have those commercials on television where people have headache number 32 or 38? And he said this migraine started at the back of my neck and, at the Pentagon, and he said, well, working here is a headache anyhow, but this was compounded by all kinds of things. And he said this man, whose code name was VT, looked at me, smiled with a twinkle in his eye, and he said, close your eyes for a minute. And he closed his eyes. And he put his hand on top of his head. He said, within seconds, just as though someone turned on a warm shower from the top of his head to his toes, something surged through him. And he said, as God is my witness, I have not had a headache since. And that's been over 20 years ago. I said, you're kidding. And he said, I just wanted you to know that I'm familiar with VT. Not ET, but VT, who was at the Pentagon. Now, back to this case. That's why I say that This information is revealed to the President and a few members of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, as well as certain select individuals at the Pentagon. The men originally in the tower where this message was recorded at Fort Knox, Kentucky, within 24 hours were debriefed. Those involved in the Captain Mantell case were debriefed. They were threatened with court-martial. And please remember, at that time, Air Force Regulation 200-2 was not in effect, and yet they were threatened with court-martial because of a violation of national security if they broke silence. Every single man in that control tower, I said every man, was shipped to various other states, military positions, outside the United States. And the message that these men heard in the control tower, and this was also, well, I'm not going to say that. This was the message that they recorded as coming from some place which they considered from that particular spacecraft to Captain Thomas Mantell. One, please release the controls. Then there was a pause. The language, perfect English. Second message, your aircraft is heading directly toward our force field. It was too late for anybody to make any turn. The third, please relax. You will not be harmed. The fourth, your vehicle is about to disintegrate. I wonder what I would have done after I heard a voice saying that. Thanks a lot. The next one, please relax. You will be taken care of. We have heard from special agents of the United States Secret Service and other people who hold credentials with the National Investigations Committee that things like this have been going on for so long that it's a matter of fact anymore in high places. We have also heard that many people who disappear under such a condition have an option, either to come back or to live perhaps on a starship or on a spaceship or even on a distant planet. That's hard for some people to swallow. And yet down through UFO history, and those of you who have studied, you remember every once in a while, every 3 or 4 years, maybe longer, you find that a pilot, now you're a pilot, you know what I mean, you're piloting a small plane, and something unusual happens. You don't know exactly what's going on. You enter some kind of a vortex, a strange situation. You cannot even hear the hum of your motor. You see the propeller spinning, but you hear nothing. You're in a strange situation. You're a bit frightened. You're very apprehensive as what's happening? What's happening? And every once in a while, down through the channels of UFO history, you find that there are countless numbers of stories where pilots are flying in one section of the United States, and the next time they find themselves, perhaps a few moments later, which prove out to be several hours later, thousands of miles away, where you know full well you never had sufficient fuel to take you to that point without refueling, and knowing full well you did not land the plane. This has happened time and time again. Perhaps these people went into some kind of a vortex and their life was spared, and they chose rather to return than to stay with space people. God, what a science fiction story that would make. And yet it's happening. It's happening on this planet Earth today. I'm going to show you a few pictures now. The gentleman will hoist the screen again. And as has been stated before, we're going to see some of the photographs that have caused some people to stay awake at night. What are you waving at, honey? Yes, I will. Yes, you had your hand up? Come over here.
You know, it was very interesting to hear that about airplanes and what happened to several pilots. And may I reveal one article in a German UFO newspaper which was published about 4 months ago. and it reveals a comment about a US helicopter pilot who was in 1964. He was transferred as a boat electrician onto a Hercules C-136, and he was transferred down to the Antarctica to McMurdoch base. And one day, it was exactly April 20th, 1964, in the early morning hours. They were from New Zealand. When I'm not mistaken, it was Christchurch, is that correct? Is that the name? To McMurdoch Air Force Base. And about 8 kilometers to the right side, there was a Russian airplane. It was a big one as well. And they flew side by side for several hours until one of the 8 crew members reported 5 lights at the right side. They didn't know at that time what it was. So the pilot of the US Hercules, he dipped the right wing, and they got sight of 5 UFOs which were heading right to the right side, same altitude as the cockpit was, and they could see it, that those were UFOs. Then they flew over top of the aircraft, and then suddenly they entered something like a haze that was described by the pilot, and there was no electric circuits working anymore. The instruments didn't work. The lights went off. The engines have stopped, and they just were waiting, for the split second when the aircraft, a Hercules C-136, crashing down to Earth. And you know what happened? And he swear on that one, nothing happened. They kept altitude. He said the only thing which there was a lot of static electricity, and as soon as you touched metal anywhere in the cockpit, they pulled sparks about that long. And that mysterious thing went on for 45 to 50 minutes, and then suddenly the light went on again. They could restart the engines. And you know what they found out when they started navigating again? That they traveled about 250 miles in those 45 to 50 minutes, and with the full power of those 4 engines, they would have made about 100 to 195 knots, which is well, a bit less than 300 miles. So in other words, they traveled faster without the engines than with the engines on, and they landed. They sat together in the cockpit, and then they related the incident, to their bosses. The aircraft, of course, it was, I don't know what you would say, in English, but anyway, nobody got access to the aircraft, and they searched it thoroughly, and they found out that the remaining fuel in the tanks, it's impossible that this airplane flew on its own power from Christchurch, New Zealand to McMurdoch Air Force Base. Now, another strange thing happened. They had a tractor and many other items, made out of iron and metal, and it lost half of its weight. So that was another strange phenomena in this case. And that pilot, he had about 2 days later, he had about 100 miles away from the spot, where they met those 5 UFOs. He met another few UFOs, but he just sighted them, on the flight. So I just wanted to relate this message, about what can happen to airplanes and how safe, those UFOs. They have never ever done any harm. I never read anything that they harmed a human being or an aircraft or anything like that.
Unusual people live on this planet. And I understand that talk is that this is a hollow planet with openings at the North and the South Pole, as well as several dozen other entrances into the caverns of this third planet from the sun. This has been called the garden spot of this particular solar system, the planet Earth. And one gentleman said that this planet Earth is the insane asylum of the universe. And what else could it be except the planet Earth? And that pink spot there, is that Elmira or Cambridge, or what is it? All right, next. Here we have the famous Van Allen radiation belt. Very few people know that during the Kennedy administration, a missile was launched from Cape Kennedy that was sent directly into the Van Allen radiation belt on the right side of the picture, and that it tore the fabric of that belt, and for that reason they believe that we've had magnetic storms that we would have never had would this missile have not been fired. How many of you have heard this before? All right, they say that the radiation belt protects the Earth against bombardment from outer space. Of course, we have bombardment from time to time, but we'd get an awful lot more were it not for the radiation belt. Next. This is considered perhaps one of the most important houses in North America. Important because decisions are made in this particular house that affect the whole world. The last time I had the privilege of visiting this house was several years ago when I personally met Mr. Sadat and Mr. Begin. And the very brief time we had a chance to spend with them was very interesting. This is the Blue Room of the White House in Washington, D.C. And someday when you receive an invitation to Washington, you can go through these various rooms, and if you're lucky, you can shake hands with the president if he's in a good mood. This is another beautiful room that folding chairs are usually located in this room, and when you have an appointment to see the president, you just sit and you sit and you wait and you wait, and after you're through waiting, you wait some more. Next. And that's one of the most beautiful rooms in the building. This is a corridor room, and many chairs are usually found in here that are occupied by the press, who are waiting to get in and ask the president what he thinks about Val Thor. Now, you don't believe that, do you? This is the president's office. From this desk, many decisions are made. Every president that sat in that chair since President Roosevelt has promised open congressional hearings into the subject of unidentified flying objects. Many presidents held press conferences, including Mr. Carter, Mr. Ford, Mr. Nixon, Mr. Eisenhower, and now our present president, who promised beyond the shadow of a doubt that they would do everything in their power before they were elected to open the files to the American public and to the world regarding the mystery of UFOs. So far, none of them have kept their word. I wonder why. You're looking at one of the pictures taken by Paul Villa in Albuquerque, New Mexico. This is a wafer-thin disc. According to experts, they say this disc is an instrument package very similar to those that are sent to foreign planets by our world governments here. This is the picture we showed on TV yesterday. Five UFOs photographed in the sky in England. Some people call it a fake. Some people say it's true. I choose to believe one of the witnesses who's a former RAF pilot who was present when the picture was taken. This is a very famous classical picture that's been seen for many years in UFO books. It was taken in Alamogordo, New Mexico, an elongated object. It's not a cloud because a stream of steam was seen coming out of the back of it, okay? You're looking at 4 unidentified flying objects completely covered with a force field, photographed by Shell Alpert at the United States Coast Guard Station in Salem, Massachusetts. No planes were sent up to investigate because by the time the call went out, the objects were gone. Another observation, they were not tracked on military radar. This, of course, was a UFO taken during the famous International Geophysical Year. It was called a Saturn-type ship, not because it came from Saturn, but because it had a ring around the object. This is the object that followed a British jetliner for many, many miles. A lady on board the jetliner took this picture with a Polaroid camera as it came alongside of the jetliner. When they landed in London, what is that, Heathrow Airport, I believe it was, she showed the picture, talked about it, and some of the experts said, well, what she did was photograph a reflection of the tail of the plane on the window of the plane. Well, photographic experts quickly pointed out that she, in order to take a picture of the wing of the plane, she would have, rather of the tail of the plane, she would have had to have been on the wing of the plane. And she assures us in writing that she was not on the wing of the plane during that flight. Here is a famous picture of a UFO, one of 3 other types that buzzed the Houston airport some years ago. No one took any photographs, however, this was a very, very accurate artist's conception, artist rendering of this picture. Incidentally, we have reports that when UFOs are in the vicinity, certain individuals along the California coast, Malibu to be exact, they walked underneath this object. They could feel heat emitting from the object. Another strange phenomena, when they stood beneath the object, they could hear nothing. Everything was blanket silence. When they stepped outside of the range of the perimeter of the object, they could hear dogs barking, the surf banging against the sand, and all kinds of highway noises and regular people noises. But once they stepped underneath the object again, dead silence. 3 UFOs photographed by a young lady in Honolulu, Hawaii. We do not know what the object to the right is. There was nothing seen in the sky in that particular section of the sky. Only these 3 UFOs executing what they call in aerodynamic circles an impossible 180. The Pleiades has been the topic of discussion for quite a few years, especially ever since the book was released by Mr. Billy Meyer from Switzerland called the Pleiades. As we look at these stars, star clusters in the universe, we kind of agree that with Dr. Werner von Braun, who made the statement that man is an egotistical fool to think he's the only intelligent being in the universe. Also, many scientists claim that there is a strong possibility, because of the trillions and billions of stars in our system and other systems, there's a possibility that life does exist as we know. While I'm on the subject, we talk about UFO people and UFO occupants as being intelligent beings. And someone said, how intelligent can they be to want to visit the planet Earth? It's a question I've been asking for a long time. The heavens by night, filled with marvels. There's an evening star, Hesperus, fairest of the stars, sharer of the throne of Aphrodite. Isn't that amazing? From an ancient Grecian poem. Watch this carefully. Unidentified flying object photographed in the skies above Switzerland. Give these each about 5 seconds. Same object. Being that these were filmed in the skies above Switzerland, I doubt whether we can call these a high-flying Canadian goose. Hold it right there, fix your focus. Now, notice the detail. Go down the catalog. Helicopter, airplane, conventional aircraft, temperature inversion, possibility of spots before a pilot's eyes, skyhook, weather balloon. No. It's definitely, we must agree that this is a picture, whether genuine or not, is a picture of what's purported to be a saucer-shaped craft, assumably from another world. because this craft was photographed so close to the ground, according to the book that was written on the subject, people took great pains in taking the original negatives to laboratories in an effort to determine the authenticity of the pictures. They say that the easiest thing in the world is to take a UFO picture. This is not true. This is the same series of pictures, although this is a different type of a saucer. Notice the corrugated edge. Now, if something like this came down in this city in broad daylight, I wonder how many people would get religion. Here are two UFOs, the same area of Switzerland. It's very rarely that you see more than one UFO. There they are again, different types. Because of the point of reference on the ground, the laboratory has something to work with. They claim that they measured the light density off of the craft as well as off of the tree in the forefront and found the negatives completely unretouched. Again, two unidentifieds. The only way we can say this is identified is because the people who wrote the book and wrote the story and were witness to this amazing series of pictures, they claim that the individual, here he is, Billy Meyer, claims that these people said that they were from the Pleiades. Now, what this man had to gain by faking such pictures is beyond me. As soon as these pictures are finished, I'll tell you what I found out about the authenticity of these photographs. These are one of the pictures that were carefully examined under laboratory conditions in an effort to detect fraud. Isn't that some shot? The UFO just landed. As soon as it takes off again, we'll show it to you, okay? Right. UFO pictures have been taken of UFOs in many, many places in the world. And different people we have found have such pictures in their possession, but because of the fear of ridicule, they haven't even shown them to anyone. And it seems strange that our society has been so geared that a person could take a vehicle, perhaps a picture of a vehicle from another world, and because of ridicule, religious or otherwise, they hide the pictures and never say a word about it. This is tragic. Very sad commentary on today's society. All right, now we're going to go down to the variation type. This is number 1 craft, 7 meters, reconnaissance ship, about 21 feet in diameter. Carries a crew of 3, has interplanetary capability of travel, claimed to be several hundred years old, and was replaced because of radiation leakage problem. All right. Type number 2, 7 meters, reconnaissance ship, 21 feet in diameter, carries a crew of 3, has interplanetary capability of travel. Type 3 coming up. 7 meters, reconnaissance ship, 21 feet in diameter, carries a crew of 3, has interplanetary capability of travel. Here we have type 5. Remote control. Place for 1 pilot. Travels limited to planetary atmosphere. Type number 4, 7 meters, reconnaissance, 21 feet in diameter. These are small, aren't they? 21 feet. Carries a crew of 3, has time travel capability and interplanetary capability of travel. What do you think about that? To go forward and backward in time. Last evening, I hope he's here tonight, we had a professor from your, is it Waterloo University? Which is the university here in town? Waterloo. And if you're here tonight, I wish you identify yourself when the lights come on. He was telling me that there is a university in the States who are very close to the answer of being able to travel faster than the speed of light, which is what? 186,000 miles per what? Per second. If we could achieve that speed, according to Einstein's theory and according to Dr. Jerome Stowell, who used to speak at our church in Boston, he said, once we approach the speed of light, we're approaching the speed of time. You've heard that before? They say that now is a fictitious barrier. Before that, they said the speed of sound is a fictitious barrier. Before that, they said if Henry Ford would go more than 15 miles an hour, he'd break the sound barrier and kill everybody on board. But just think of it. In your lifetime, there is a possibility for a breakthrough as far as the speed of light is concerned, and maybe even time travel. Wasn't it Mr. Einstein who was working on the theory that it would be possible someday to achieve time travel? How many of you remember reading something like that? I know Nikola Tesla talked about that once or twice, and several other people who are really interested in the strange phenomena of time travel. All right? This is one of the most important structures in the world too, because many decisions made from this level affect other nations on this planet Earth. This is the entrance walkway in New York City to the United Nations building. Pardon me for saying this, but as a peacekeeping force, the United Nations has proven to be a dud. But still there are individuals, including Abdul Ghana, the head of the Outer Space Affairs Committee at this building, the United Nations in New York City, who are trying everything in their power to bring together an international forum of UFO researchers, of individual scientists, who will not be influenced either by political or any other means, to bring about an honest investigation into the UFO subject, which could finally culminate in the invitation, in the open United Nations invitation for outer space people to come and visit them. And I believe at that time, it will be proven conclusively that the people of this planet might stand a chance. A lot of people have hung their hats on the United Nations for many, many things. But I believe in Canada, United States, Australia, England, many other places throughout the world, there needs to be a coming together of scientists and honest researchers in an effort to call together some real valid answers on this subject. How many of you agree? Say aye. Again, it's been such a tremendous pleasure to speak with you and to share some of the little knowledge that we have on UFOs. Tomorrow night we're going to show the movies. We're going to cover some other subjects as time permits. Until then, we bid you good night and God bless you all.